Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bipartisan Policy Center's release of a report, Scaling Investments in Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry. I am Jason Gourmet, president of BPC, and excited for the next 45 minutes or so. But just to set the stage, often we will name reports in clever acronym. I think you could probably imagine that SICAF or PsycAF, that was not actually our goal here. I want to focus on the first two words of this report, which are scaling and investment. Of just about every theme in the somewhat tortured climate debate, natural climate solutions probably has the most bipartisan support, which is fantastic. But it also creates a little bit of a risk of happy talk, right? It allows people to think that there's just kind of easy agreement and not the kind of hard work that we know is going to be necessary to turn this into both a meaningful climate solution, but also a meaningful engine of rural economic growth. And so that is why about 15 months ago, we had 20 people come together from across industry, forestry, ag, advocacy, climate advocacy, former political leaders, to see if we could actually try to develop a meaningful foundation to scale investment in natural climate solutions. Looking forward very much to the discussion that will follow, led by our co-chairs, former Senators Heidi Heitkamp and Saxby Chambliss. But to start, it is a real pleasure to be able to introduce the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. I don't think anybody could have a better resume for both his job right now and this discussion. This is Secretary Vilsack's second tour of duty in this position. He was the longest serving member of the original Obama cabinet. He has also served 2 terms as governor of the state of Iowa. He has served in the state senate in Iowa. He was the mayor of Mount Pleasant. And I tell you all this in part because I think it reveals that Secretary Vilsack understands both the climate, the global finance, and the local economic and cultural issues that are going to have to be brought together to achieve, I think, what we all believe is an important outcome. And finally, I will just say that Secretary Vilsack possesses something that is really in very short supply in Washington, and that is trust. The people coming together around this conversation don't know each other all that well, but they all know Tom Vilsack. A lot of them don't quite trust each other yet, but they all trust Secretary Tom Vilsack. And so, Mr. Secretary, this is your superpower. We are going to be relying on you to wield it assertively in the next few months, because I think this matters to a lot of us. And we are really fortunate to have you at the helm of USDA. So with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for that gracious introduction. And it is an honor, really, for me to be here today and looking forward to the conversation with 2 great Americans who understand and appreciate and care passionately about rural America, and that's Saxby Chambliss and Heidi Heitkamp. I worked with both of these individuals in my last time as secretary, and I know that they bring to this discussion a heartfelt desire that agriculture in this country survive and that rural communities begin to thrive again. And I think there is a real opportunity here. I think there are 2 fundamental goals that we're trying to address at USDA that are very consistent with the report that you're issuing today. One is the necessity of agriculture to be a leading effort in the nation's efforts to try to mitigate the consequences of a changing climate. The president has an audacious goal of a net zero agriculture by the year 2050. He'd like to see us cut 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions in ag and forestry by the year 2030. Now, that obviously is a climate-related goal. But I think there's also the opportunity here to address a fundamental issue of agriculture, and that is bringing more revenue, more income opportunities into agriculture through climate-smart agricultural practices. So I think there's an opportunity here not only to impact the climate, but also to improve farm income. So we put together a strategy, again, very consistent with the report that you've issued today at USDA to try to advance this notion of climate-smart agriculture. It's got a number of components. We want to focus on climate-smart agriculture. We want to make sure we do a better job of managing our forest and reforestation. We want to decarbonize our rural electric cooperatives and generation capacity in rural America, and we want to expand significantly renewable energy and fuel production. And by doing that, I think we create enormous opportunity in rural places, and we'll meet those audacious goals that President Biden has set. Now, let me talk about climate smart agriculture. There are a number of strategies there. One is to basically use our existing conservation programs that these two senators were great supporters of while they were in the Senate. We want to leverage those existing programs. We want to take our CRP program and encourage more grassland activity, which we have started. Most recently in 2021, we increased rental rates. We tried to make CRP more attractive and more competitive. And in doing so, we saw a fairly significant uptake in interest in CRP. We were at a record low number of acres. Today, we had about 5.3 million acres added to the program, a significant percentage of that in grasslands, which obviously has an impact on retaining and storing carbon. We want to take a look at innovation. So we created a $40 million resource under our Conservation Innovation Grant Program to incent new ways of doing things, to learn more about climate smart agriculture. We also wanted to enlarge our partnerships. We have a regional conservation partnership program that these two senators were instrumental in forming, an opportunity to take our resources at the federal level and leverage them with partners across the country. Over $405 million invested in 100 projects that are focused on climate smart agriculture under the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We looked at our risk management program. We said, what can we do there? Well, we can provide farmers an incentive to do cover crops by reducing their crop insurance payment if they are engaged in cover crop. And now we're working with a variety of commodity groups with the Farmers for Soil Health Initiative to double the number of acres in cover crop from roughly 14 to 15 million acres in America today to 30 million acres by the year 2030. So there's a lot going on in the existing programs, but we need to do more. And that's why I'm hopeful this month that we will establish the framework for what we refer to as the Climate Partnership, Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry Partnership Initiative. Now, what this is essentially an opportunity to create a new commodity, if you will, a climate smart commodity in the United States. You know, we've got organic, we've got everything else. There's a value proposition here for farmers. There's the ability to respond to the market that wants to know and wants to be able to say to customers of food products around the country and the world that they've been sustainably produced. There's a value added opportunity here. But the challenge is, what does it mean to be a climate smart commodity? How do you measure it? How do you quantify it? How do you guarantee and verify that indeed a particular product is a climate smart commodity? We want to establish that with this partnership. We want to take resources, a significant amount of resources from the Commodity Credit Corporation, up to $1 billion, and we want to basically put that out. Say to the farm and forestry community, here are resources for large-scale demonstration and pilot projects. The ability for us to aggregate the activities of farmers and forest landowners across the country, collect data and information from what they're doing in terms of climate smart practices, the environmental and the climate impact of each of those practices, be able to quantify and measure, and then be able to establish the standard for a climate smart commodity. And then be able to say to the industry, farmers now have met the challenge. They've met the standard. And they need to be rewarded for that standard. And they can be rewarded not only in the market value of those climate smart commodities, but also in the ability to qualify for private markets, for carbon markets, for water markets, for wildlife markets, a tremendous opportunity for different revenue streams, new revenue streams that haven't been created before, or to expand significantly those revenue streams so that farmers are benefited. And America can be the first to do this. America can lead an international effort in this regard. And in doing so, it'll give us a tremendous advantage in our export market opportunities. So you can see there's a tremendous amount of energy behind climate smart agriculture. Forestry is also part of this. And we just recently announced a 10-year plan to do a better job of managing our forests so that we reduce the catastrophic wildfires that have been so devastating. This plan is pretty audacious as well. We want to treat an additional 20 million acres above and beyond what we're already doing in the next 10 years. And we want the Forest Service to work collaboratively on another 30 million acres of non-federal, non-Forest Service land, other federal agencies' land, state lands, private forest lands. So 50 million acres being treated in a way that will prevent catastrophic wildfire. And at the same time, look at ways in which we can reforest, ways in which we can replant, ways in which we can expand the number of trees that are growing. We have a goal. The bipartisan infrastructure bill that President Biden led to conclusion now has lifted the cap off the PLAN Act, which allows us now to take more than $30 million, now potentially significantly more, that will allow us to plant over the next 10 years 1.2 billion additional trees in our national forest, over 4 million acres. Now, that's also going to help us essentially retain about 750 million metric tons of carbon. So there's exciting work in the forestry area. Now, you have to have the ability to use that wood. So we're looking for creative ways to use wood with mass timber projects, the ability to build multi-story buildings, structural materials, utilizing wood, particularly diseased wood that is out in the West. Tremendous opportunity to, again, expand not only income for those forest owners, but also jobs in rural places. And speaking of that, and speaking of markets, what a tremendous market we now will have as we convert our aviation and marine fuel from existing supplies to a bio-based future. We have established at USDA a partnership with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy on a massive effort to build this aviation and marine fuel industry. It's a 36 billion gallon industry, 100% drop-in fuel, not blended as we have with cars and trucks, but 100% blended bio-based fuel. Where can it come from? It can come from agricultural waste. It can come from woody biomass. It can help the aviation industry meet the low carbon standards of the future, again, allowing us additional revenue sources for farmers and forested landowners. And on the rural electric side, we obviously understand and appreciate as we ask these rural electric cooperatives and others to convert to renewable energy sources. There are stranded assets. There's debt load on those stranded assets, and we want to be in a position to help that conversion by relieving some of that debt and allowing it to move over to expand opportunities on renewable side. So I think you can see that there are unlimited opportunities here, very consistent with the plan that you all have put forward, and creates, I think, an exciting new future in agriculture. One in which farmers will not only benefit from the sale of their commodity or feeding their commodities to livestock, but creating carbon credits, the opportunity to create agricultural waste into biofuels and other chemicals, materials, fabrics, and fibers, new jobs in rural places. So this is an exciting opportunity. And with the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the support of the administration, we have the resources to be able to advance this initiative. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the conversation with my good friends and hope that this gives you a sense that we are very much aligned with the report that you put together.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Gentarosimi, Managing Director of the Energy Program at the Bipartisan Policy Center. And I'm so pleased to introduce the co-chairs of BPC's Farm and Forest Carbon Solutions Task Force, former Senators Saxby Chambliss and Heidi Heitkamp, who will be joined in a moment by Secretary Vilsack for further conversation. And following their chat, we will open up for questions from the audience. So please get your questions ready and type them in at any time using the chat function in YouTube, or you can tweet at us using the hashtag BBC Live or our Twitter handle at BBC_bipartisan. So Senator Saxby Chambliss is a partner in the DLA Piper Global Law Firm. He served for 4 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives and 2 terms in the U.S. Senate on many committees, including the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, and was vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp served as the first female senator elected from North Dakota. She previously served as North Dakota's Attorney General and elected State Tax Commissioner, and is the founder and chair of the One Country Project, an organization focused on addressing the needs and concerns of rural America. And I'll just say on a personal note, I'm so grateful for the time and the leadership that the senators have given, and all of our task force members have really dedicated these past 15 months to really dig into these issues for actionable policy solutions. And so I will just kick off this chat by asking the senators, what drew you to want to serve in this capacity and to work with us on these issues of natural climate solutions?
Well, I'm happy to respond there, Leslie. Number one, to having the opportunity to work with my longtime dear friend, Senator Heitkamp, was exciting. We worked closely together on the Senate Ag Committee and did some really good work from time to time in that capacity. Including the times that we had the opportunity to work with then Secretary Vilsack, who I can't, Tom, not mention today. Thank you again for willing to step up and provide the leadership that you're providing at the department today, just as you did during the Obama administration. Thank you for that. But, I come from the heart of ag country in Southwest Georgia. My home county is often referred as the most diversified farming county in America. And we depend on good farm programs, and our farmers are always looking for other streams of income to support and add on to the programs that they're existing today. And my farmers and ranchers were like me, was somewhat slow to the climate change trough, but obviously because of weather patterns and whatever that we've seen, something's going on. And by working with Heidi on this task force, I have the opportunity to really have an impact in a positive way to my farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners in Georgia. So it's been a lot of fun. It's exactly what I anticipated that it would be. And we're going to be engaged further now relative to the recommendations are coming out. And hopefully policymakers are listening today, because they're going to hear from us more about what these recommendations are, and look forward to be a resource to them as they move into the Farm Bill debates as we start this year and next year.
Well, I can't but agree with Saxby on this opportunity for us, the old guard who leave, who then get to come back and be part of a big dialogue on a big issue, working with people you love and respect, who are really, really smart. And so when I was asked, I thought, this is a chance to understand what's happening in the South, what's happening in forestry, in agriculture, but it also is an opportunity to work with really, really smart people who care deeply about what they're doing. And that's really part of it. But what really brought me to it is kind of my life experience, where it always seems like agriculture is 2 steps behind in a trend that then you miss opportunity. And so recognizing that what was the guiding principle for us, which is that too often agriculture in rural America feels like things are done to them, not with them. And this is an opportunity to get ahead of that, to actually say, look, these are folks who know what they're doing, who understand how you put seed in the ground and grow crops, how you plant a tree, and have been doing it for generations and generations on family farms. And they too respect the environment. They too respect what's happening in America. And if they want to participate in this climate debate, there should be a way for them not only to do that, but to basically be able to commoditize the work that they're doing as carbon becomes more and more of a commodity that will get traded. And then finally, the Secretary of Agriculture, it's harder to be more wonky than he is. Tom is someone who, there is just never any any chaff in what he says. It is all substance. And I think that knowing that he was going to be at the helm, listening, that he was going to be at the helm, doing what he needed to do to implement this, to take the input, I knew that it would not fall on deaf ears, the work that we're doing. And I also have great respect for the committee chairs in both the House and the Senate, and believe that we could help them in steering a path forward that was farm friendly, that was rancher friendly, that was forestry friendly. So excited to do it. Grateful for an amazing staff and for the work that Leslie and her team did, because they made it fun and they made it easy.
Yeah. So, Ms. Secretary, I'm going to kick this off a little bit. There are many folks like me within agriculture and forestry that have been slow to come around to being part of the conversation on climate change. But I'm now seeing this as a potential opportunity. I see that we have the opportunity to address a serious environmental problem and at the same time creating new economic opportunities. So, Ms. Secretary, can you share from some reflections on how you think the policy conversation has changed since you first announced initiatives like the USDA climate hubs back in 2014?
Senator, that's a great question. And boy, it has been a sea change. It may be because people are seeing extensive drought, catastrophic wildfires, tornadoes in December in the South, hurricanes of incredible force, and other storms that have ripped through croplands across the United States. I think people are seeing it on the ground, as you indicated. I think it's also, we've begun to define this and to talk about it in a different way. And you just basically alluded to it. There's an opportunity side here to this issue. There's an opportunity for new revenue streams for farmers. And I think when you recognize that sadly today, 89.6% of farms in America today do not generate the majority of income for the farm families who are farming them. That tells me we've got work to do. We've got to create more new and better markets. And with the climate opportunity, there is the chance, as I've alluded to, for farmers and ranchers to be able to do certain things on their farm that will create more productive soil, that will clean up the water, that will allow them to continue to do what they love to do, but also qualify for the ability to essentially earn carbon credits, water credits, wildlife credits, which is additional income sources. And as we do this, we create that climate smart commodity, that higher value proposition, then they'll be in a position to essentially receive more for their hard-earned work. When you combine that with a local and regional food system effort, expanding processing capacity in this country, for example, now you've got essentially an economy that's working, creating multiple ways. And as you explain that to farmers, they get to see it, they get to understand it, and they know that not only are they going to do right by the environment, which they always want to do, but now they see the profit side, not just the expense side of this. And so I think that there has been a sea change. I think finally, there's also, I think, a recognition that exports are so important to agriculture. 20 to 30% of what we grow gets exported. Well, here's a news flash. The rest of the world is really focused on climate. Much of what we sell is in Asia, and many of those countries are coastal. They are deeply concerned about climate. They want to make sure that when they're purchasing commodities, they aren't damaging the climate, they're helping the climate. And so it's an imperative for us from a domestic market perspective and from a foreign market perspective to embrace this. And if we can do it in a way where the financial risk is eliminated by these demonstration and pilot projects, I think farmers are going to be very, very interested and excited about following the plan that you all have put forward, the plan that the Farmers and Food Alliance has put forward, which our plan is very, very consistent with.
When we looked at, I should say, Mr. Secretary, when we looked at this and we talked about these voluntary carbon markets, we engaged large potential purchasers on that voluntary market system, because we need them to provide that income stream if we're really going to have a public-private market and have a public-private solution to this in terms of dollars. Doing what you and Saxby and I believe is essential, which is to provide that additional income stream. And they talked a lot about reputational risk, like how can we verify and guarantee that those credits are real, that the sequestration is real, and that we are buying something that has permanency and won't lead to someone pointing a finger later on saying you bought junk, and so all of your effort is for naught. I'm wondering, I know that you're going to be tasked with looking at those voluntary markets, putting together some legitimacy. How do you do that from USDA? What's your current plans in terms of implementation and providing technical support to those kinds of markets?
Well, that's the purpose and function of our pilot and demonstration projects. Basically putting money on the table and essentially saying to the agriculture and forestry community, come to us with an aggregated number of producers that are committed to a certain specific number of climate smart practices and forest management practices. Come to us and tell us what it will cost to implement the equipment, the other activities and technologies that have to be embraced so that farmers don't, in a sense, have a financial risk in embracing these practices. The only thing we ask of these farmers is, in addition to doing what they promise to do, that they allow us to be able to aggregate the information and data from the consequences, the results of these actions, which will allow us then to basically crunch numbers with our great land grant universities, our minority serving institutions, that will allow us to be able to come up with a standard that says this is a verified, if you do this practice or you do this combination of practices that produces a commodity, you can be assured that that's a climate smart commodity. Why? Because we can tell you what environmental benefit has accrued as a result of those actions. We already have measurement tools. We need to refine them. We already have the ability to map out how this can be done, but we need to refine it and create a standardized method here of establishing what a climate smart commodity is. Once you've got that standard, well then, Senator, then you're in a position to say to the market, you can be very comfortable, you can be very confident that the environmental result you need in order to establish that credit is in fact occurring on this farm, is in fact occurring on this range. And you can compensate that farmer for taking those steps and those practices. It's a great partnership.
Just as a follow-up, Mr. Secretary, how far out do you think you are from that kind of verification in terms of timeline?
Well, we need to do this yesterday. And so the pressure is on us to get it done, and to get it done in a matter of years. I mean, we're not talking about decades here. We're talking about several years of data collection, which will really allow us to refine the data that we already have, the information and measurement tools we already have, whether it's GraceNet or Comet Farm or Comet Farm Planning. There are systems in place today, but we need to refine them, and we need to populate them with aggregate amounts of data, not just individual farmer information. And I think that can happen with this demonstration effort that we've got with this partnership initiative. And I think in the matter of a couple of years, we're going to be in a much better place to be able to provide that certainty. And I would say also, this is a process in which we can simplify farmers' ability to tap into these credits. I mean, right now, the system is way too complex, requires far too much from farmers, and they're just not going to be doing it for the economic return. If we create a climate smart commodity with value added, and we make it easier for them to participate in these markets, and they're privately run markets, not government run markets, but privately run markets, then you've got the best of both worlds. And I think you're going to see the farmers very much interested in this.
Mr. Secretary, some skeptics are raising an issue relative to why should American agriculture step out here when we know that China is not going to likely to adopt the same types of practices that we are. You've been outspoken on the importance of agriculture being heard in forums in which climate action is designed and implemented both nationally and globally. Can you address the importance of American leadership on climate action and agriculture for building market share and growing competitive advantage within the context of your engagements on global trade?
Well, I think one of the things we are focused on at USDA is not only trying to embrace the China market, but also diversifying away from our over-reliance on this market. And to do that, you need to focus on areas of the world like Southeast Asia that are very sensitive. From my previous experience working in the dairy industry, I know that people pay attention to whether a particular product is climate smart or not. Why do I know this is going to be a competitive challenge in the export market? Because I see one of our competitors, the EU, very much engaged in trying to get to this net zero world in a much different way than we are. It's a regulatory way. It's a forcing and compelling way. We think there's a better way to do it here in the U.S. through innovation and through incentives. And so it's a race. It's a race to get there first, because when you get there first, you essentially then create the standard. You are the standard. And from that, you then have the market advantage of being the standard in those diversified markets. And then you pull along everybody else. And that's really what American agriculture historically has done in all of its innovations and its productivity. And then when you start talking about African nations where there's going to be a tremendous market opportunity, it's the ability for us to essentially get a foothold there as well. So in the emerging markets, Senator, we've got to play this game and we have to win this game. And we can't just depend on being able to sell to China, because that's not particularly a reliable market from year to year. We need to diversify. And this is one way of ensuring that we have those diversified market opportunities.
I don't know if this is the point where I get to ask more questions, or if Leslie's going to pop in with some audience questions. But Mr. Secretary, you're going to once again help shepherd from USDA that new farm bill. And I think almost all producers, whether they're ranchers or farmers, believe that climate will play a role in that discussion. How far along are you with the committees? How far along are you to building a consensus around many of these plans that you have, so that they'll be seen and the opportunities will be available in the new farm bill?
Well, I think we're making headway. We're just beginning the process, and I really appreciate Senator Chambliss's optimism in getting a farm bill over the next 2 years. That would be on time, which would be something unusual for our friends in Congress, with all due respect. And so we're just getting started the process, and that's one of the reasons why these demonstration projects are so important. Because we then can then populate the conversation with real world experience on how this works. And I think we can then take members of the committee to farms that are embracing this net zero future. They can see the income stream opportunities. They can actually talk to the farmers about their excitement about this and not their reluctance. It makes it a little bit easier to formulate that policy. At the same time, I started by pointing out that our strategy in part is also based on leveraging existing programs. I mean, there are existing programs that are very beneficial here. The RCPP program, we have got 100 projects that are taking place across America with partnerships, $400 million of our resource, but that's leveraging a significant amount of resources for climate smart projects. And so I think we've got a full department engagement in this. We've got innovation going on. We've got climate hubs expanding their participation in this. We've got conservation programs expanding. We've got the CRP program fully engaged. We've got RMA engaged. And so I think you're seeing a whole of USDA effort here, rural development being involved with the renewable energy efforts and fuel efforts. So I'm excited about this. And I think as we educate House committee members and Senate committee members on what we are doing, we see that same level of enthusiasm. The chairs certainly understand this and appreciate it, very supportive of it in the budget. And I think if we do a good job of launching these pilots and demonstration projects, I think that'll go a long way to increasing the comfort level and making it a little bit easier for that aspect of the Farm Bill to be resolved.
So Tom, one of the questions that we get often, or we got often, is what about the early adapters, the ranchers and the farmers who were already like on board doing the things that we know we're trying to expand those existing conservation programs in? What's going to be in it for them, given that they've been doing this for so long?
Well, I think there are two groups that we're really particularly sensitive to in setting up these pilots and demonstration efforts. One is the early adopters. We want to make sure that they are included in this, that they're not penalized for the fact that they were early adopters, that they get to fully participate, they get the full benefits of this effort. So rest assured, we are very sensitive to their concerns. The other is the area of underserved, underrepresented producers, the smaller, very, very small producers. How can we assure that someone with a very small operation can participate? If you think about this, it's really difficult for somebody that's got 100 acres or 200 acres to engage in carbon markets and things of that nature. You just don't generate enough on your own to be able to pique interest. But if we get a number of those small farms aggregating, you create enough size to make a difference. You give those small producers the ability, small scale producers, the ability to participate fully and completely in this effort. So we're structuring this program in a way that will ensure that there are opportunities for very, very small operations, for underrepresented producers that maybe have not had the benefits of all USDA programs. We're going to make sure that they are included. And at the same time, we're going to make sure that we don't penalize those early adopters. So it's going to be an effort that also recognizes, as was mentioned earlier in this program, there are geographic differences. You know, I think it's a little different farming in North Dakota than it is in Georgia. And I know it's a little bit different in both of those states than what the West is currently experiencing out there with wildfires and drought. So there are significant issues here, that geographic differences. There are also commodity differences. I mean, Saxby talked about the fact that he's got diverse agriculture. Well, gosh, the question is, how do you let that blueberry grower in Georgia participate in this program while ensuring that sorghum producer in Minnesota, or that wheat farmer in the Dakotas, or that soybean producer is able to participate? How do you make that happen? Well, you create enough flexibility in the program that every commodity can be engaged, every geographic area can be engaged, every sized operation can be engaged, so that it's a whole of agricultural opportunity. Nobody's being left out here. And it's also important to include the forestry piece of this, because no matter how great a job we do on the agriculture side, if we don't contain these catastrophic fires, all that carbon that's been stored for hundreds of years in those forests goes up in smoke. So we have to make sure we reduce that catastrophic fire risk as well while we're doing the ag side of it. And that's how you get ultimately to a net zero future.
Thank you all. We have about 10 minutes left, so we are moving into the audience question period of our program today. So please, again, type your questions into the chat or tweet at us at #BPC Live. But we do have a question coming in. Secretary Vilsack, I wonder if you could tell us about your thoughts on opportunities related to the workforce. A lot of the practices that we're talking about today, including reforestation, conservation practice adoption, a lot of that requires, labor and boots on the ground. So where do you see opportunities in partnership with colleges and universities?
Well, I think there are a couple opportunities. We're going to try to make sure that we're recruiting the brightest and best here at USDA to make sure that we have a workforce that is attuned to the important challenges of climate and the opportunity side of climate. The reality is only 8% of those who work at USDA are under the age of 35. That means that there are a lot more of people that sort of look more like me, and we need more folks that are younger to get into USDA. So a significant effort to recruit folks. There's also, the president has proposed the establishment of a civilian climate corps, which would be sort of patterned after our civilian conservation corps. And the goal here, of course, is to bring thousands of people into this effort to embrace the notion of their participation. It may be they're helping the Forest Service, maybe they're helping NRCS in terms of providing access and information to farmers and embracing all of this, so that this climate smart conservation corps will also amplify and complement our efforts to try to recruit the brightest and best at USDA. And between the two of them, we're going to obviously go out to our universities, our campuses, and particularly our minority serving institutions. There are a lot of bright young folks there that we really haven't made the case to as effectively as maybe we've made in some of the more traditional land grant universities. So I think our goal here is to make sure we cast a wider net, to make sure that we have the resources to be able to expand fellowships and internships and scholarships that will attract people to this particular area. And I think you're going to see a very aggressive effort by USDA to do that.
Thank you. And senators, we have a question coming in from Craig Hoffman about the fact that our report has a lot of recommendations, 24. And so where do you see maybe the top 2 or 3 least regrets strategies, something that can be implemented quickly and have significant impact?
Well, I think clearly one of our major recommendations deals with expansion of conservation programs that have been in existence for many years and have been working very well. But oftentimes we run out of money, and Tom's folks would like to engage more farmers and ranchers in these conservation programs, but there just aren't enough funds. And so what we think should happen is that USDA would review all of their programs, particularly inside the conservation title in the Farm Bill, and see which programs are really working well and which ones are not maybe getting their bang for the buck. And if we can shift some money around, for example, EQIP is one that virtually in all parts of the country is utilized, but it oftentimes runs out of money, and so some of our farmers won't be able to take advantage of EQIP. But if we can move some other conservation title money that maybe isn't being utilized enough, is able to allow these farmers and ranchers around the country to totally take advantage of these programs.
I guess I would have to say that the biggest emerging issue is in forestry, which is kind of ironic that I would bring it up given that I'm from North Dakota and forest fires aren't exactly our problem right now. But I think Secretary Vilsack is absolutely right to talk about, once that carbon goes up, it takes years to recarbonize a forest. And so what can we do? What can USDA do? What can we do in support of USDA and working with people in the forestry industry, many of which are not federal lands in the eastern part of the United States? What can we do to make sure that we, number one, continue to sequester that carbon in existing forests, and how we can mitigate and hopefully, restrict the damage that's being done on wildfires? This is an emerging issue, not only in terms of carbon, but also air quality in Western North Dakota. I mean, when you're playing a football game in Minnesota, in Montana, and North Dakota and Montana are playing, and you literally can't see the field, something needs to be done, especially with our neighbors to the north in Canada. And so I know that the secretary said they are hyper focused on forestry right now. I think there's things within the Plant Act, just really amping up the work that's being done in that lane. Can have big climate consequences right now, and also other kinds of air quality consequences.
That's the beauty of having removed the cap from the Plant Act. That's going to give us the ability to plant a heck of a lot more trees. And to Senator Chambliss's comment, one of the opportunities with the Build Back Better legislation, I'm still holding out hope that the climate portions of that still have life. And if they do, I think there's a concerted effort in that to increase significantly resources available for conservation programs. So we certainly support that.
We have a question coming in about the connection between what we're talking about with natural climate solutions as being a climate mitigation strategy, as well as the benefits and co-benefits for resilience. So I wonder if, Mr. Secretary, you could talk a little bit more about the connection you see there.
Well, let me focus on soil health. That's been an increasing area of interest, both domestically and internationally. In fact, we're looking forward to having a workshop on soil health to bring the experts to really begin to focus on this piece of it. The ability to improve the health of soil obviously improves the capacity of it to withstand some of the challenges that climate will present. When you combine a focus on soil health with the research component that will enable us to genetically edit crops so that they become more resilient, more the ability to withstand extreme droughts or floods or whatever it might be, that what you have is an essentially a much more resilient agricultural opportunity and agricultural system. So I think we have to do both. Right? I think we have to invest aggressively in regenerative practices to make sure that soil health is what it needs to be. We're losing way too much topsoil in this country, and we really have to address this as a really serious issue, because that's the lifeblood of any farming operation. If you don't have good soil, if you don't have the ability to grow because you've essentially squandered that topsoil and it's floated down a river into the Gulf of Mexico, for example, and creating a dead zone, what good does that do for anybody? So the ability to embrace conservation practices, the ability to embrace cover crops, the ability to have rotational grazing, all of those things have an impact on soil health and the ability to make that soil be able to be healthy and prosperous in the future. The benefit of this isn't just creating that climate smart commodity, isn't just satisfying the opportunity to participate in these ecosystem markets. It's also building a much more productive soil that will produce more over time. And I tell you, we're challenged in agriculture to continue to produce more on less or with less because of the growing world population. So tremendous opportunities here, multiple wins, if you will, if we do this right.
Leslie, if I can add to this, there are so many producers out there who are early adapters, who are really ambassadors. We had a serious drought in North Dakota. Guess what? The guy who had used EQIP and had that kind of what the secretary's talking about, soil practices, grazing practices, he didn't have to buy any hay. And so now all of a sudden, all the neighbors look across the fence and say, now I get it. And so, people asked me this morning, why aren't more people adopting this? I said, because people's natural inclination is to do what they've always done. And if you're making a living doing it, it works out. But I think there is that not only not have the government talk about it, but have all of those great producers out there who are building resiliency in their soil, who are, using soil as a way to retain water and have more resiliency, have them be the ambassadors. And I think there's a real opportunity to get boots on the ground. People feel more comfortable hearing about it from their neighbor than they do from, a PhD at NDSU. Sorry, NDSU, but it's true because they've seen it in practice. And I think that's one of the things the secretary's been very good about, that USDA finding those ambassadors and getting them out there talking about the work that they're doing and the dual benefits. And we know those exact conservation practices on sustainability have a great residual impact on climate. And so these are not conflicting goals. These are really two things that can go hand in hand.
This issue of partnership, I think, is a really important message that Senator Heitkamp is emphasizing here. There are some interesting coalitions and alliances that are forming in connection with climate, where you've got conservation, environmental groups, and major farm and commodity groups joining together, working together to advance the notion of climate smart agriculture. It's really great to see. And honestly, this forum is being sponsored by a bipartisan group. My heavens, this is an opportunity maybe to remind America that when people work together, there's nothing we can't do. And if we continue to be divided, there's nothing we will do. So I really applaud all of the folks who are engaged in this bipartisan effort, because I think you're trying to remind us of how we should be doing business, of getting along and working together, not looking for where we disagree, but where we agree and building on that. And I think the plan that you put forward again, very consistent with what we're trying to do, is reflective of our effort to be part of that, of the solution.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We are over time, so unfortunately, have to wrap up this portion. Thank you all for joining us today. It is my great privilege to be here with Secretary Tom Vilsack, Senator Saxby Chambliss, and Senator Heidi Heitkamp. Thank you all again. Please do subscribe to BPC's events page for more updates from our Farm and Forest Carbon Solutions Initiative. We'll be doing more in this series of webinars about our task force and its recommendations, and we will see you next time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.